Mary was a widow, living on a small farm in the outskirts of a quiet town. After the sudden death of her husband, life became harder than she ever imagined. She was left alone with her two young children, struggling to keep the farm running. Every day was a challenge, but she didn't complain. She worked tirelessly, waking up before dawn and working until the sun set, just to make sure her children had enough to eat and a roof over their heads. The farm was far from prosperous, but it was all she had. The crops barely grew and the animals were few. Despite these challenges, Mary kept a brave face. Her children, a boy named Thomas and a girl named Sarah, helped as much as they could. They understood that their mother was doing her best and they did their part with a smile, even if it was hard. One particularly cold winter afternoon, as Mary and her children worked in the barn, they heard the sound of hooves approaching. At first, they thought it was a passing traveler or perhaps one of the neighbors. But the sound grew louder, and soon a man on horseback appeared at the end of their dirt path. The horse was moving slowly, and the rider looked like he was struggling to stay upright. As the man drew closer, Mary could see that he wasn't just a traveler. He was badly injured. His clothes were torn and his face was pale, covered in sweat from the pain. The horse slowed to a halt just in front of the barn, and the man slumped off the saddle, collapsing onto the ground. Mary's heart skipped a beat as she rushed to him, her instincts kicking in. "Are you all right?" she called out, her voice filled with concern. The man groaned but didn't answer. His breathing was shallow and it was clear he was in severe pain. Mary didn't know who he was or where he had come from, but she couldn't leave him there. Without thinking, she turned to her children. "Get some blankets quickly," she instructed. Her son, Thomas, ran inside the house to grab the warmest blankets they had, while Sarah stayed by her side. Together, they managed to lift the man and carry him into the barn, where Mary had a small bed set up for anyone who needed help. She laid him down carefully, trying not to make him move too much as his injuries seemed severe. Mary worked quickly, using the little knowledge she had of first aid. She cleaned his wounds with water, trying to stop the bleeding as best as she could. But she knew she wasn't a doctor, and there was only so much she could do with the resources she had. "Please help me," she whispered as she worked, almost as if asking for guidance. But the man didn't respond. He was unconscious, his face twisted in pain. Hours passed and Mary didn't leave his side. Her children kept to themselves, not fully understanding the gravity of the situation, but they could sense their mother's worry. They stayed quietly in the corner of the barn, watching their mother as she tended to the stranger. As night fell, Mary continued to work. She had no way of knowing who this man was or if he would even survive the night. All she knew was that she couldn't just leave him to die. He was a stranger, but he was a human being, and Mary had a heart full of compassion. It was the way her husband had been before he passed away, the same kindness that kept her going when things seemed impossible. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the man's breathing began to slow and he stirred. Mary's heart jumped as she leaned closer, trying to see if he was waking up. Slowly, his eyelids fluttered open and he blinked, confused and disoriented. He looked around the barn as if unsure of where he was. "Wait, where am I?" he croaked, his voice raspy. "You're safe," Mary replied softly. "I found you by the road. You were hurt. I couldn't leave you there." The man's eyes flickered as he tried to sit up but winced from the pain. Mary gently placed her hand on his shoulder, urging him to stay still. "Don't move too quickly. You're still hurt." The man looked at her, and for a moment Mary could see something in his eyes, a mix of confusion and gratitude. He opened his mouth to say something, but his voice failed him. Instead, he simply nodded weakly and closed his eyes again. "My name is Thomas Lawson," the man finally managed to say after a moment of silence. "I don't know how I ended up here, but thank you." Mary gave him a small smile, though she didn't expect anything in return. She had always believed that doing the right thing was enough. She didn't need a reward for saving a life. It was simply what one did when another was in need. "Rest now, Mr. Lawson. You're safe here," she said gently. For the next few days, Thomas Lawson remained in the barn, recovering from his injuries. Mary continued to care for him, offering what little food and comfort she could. It wasn't much, but it was all she had to give. Her children, though curious about the stranger in their midst, never once complained. They knew their mother was doing what was right, and that was enough for them. One evening, as Mary was cleaning up after dinner, Thomas spoke again. "I have money. I'll pay you for all this. For the food, the care." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. Mary shook her head. I don't need your money. I did what anyone would do. You're not the first person I've helped. Thomas's face softened. There was something about her kindness that made him feel ashamed of his wealth, of the privileges he had taken for granted. He didn't know who this woman was, but her heart was pure. In a world where people only looked out for themselves, she had saved him without a second thought. I'll repay you somehow, he said quietly, a promise in his voice, but Mary only smiled, her eyes kind yet firm. You don't have to repay me. Just get better. And with that, the unlikely bond between Mary and the injured rancher began to form. Neither of them knew it at the time, but this simple act of kindness would change their lives forever. As the days passed, Thomas's recovery continued slowly but steadily. Mary, despite the demands of her own life on the farm, never once wavered in her care for the stranger who had been left at her door. She kept him warm, fed him, and made sure he had everything he needed to heal. Though Thomas was a stranger, Mary never treated him like one. She offered him kindness and comfort, knowing he had nowhere else to turn. During his time in the barn, Thomas began to observe more about Mary and her children. He had been so absorbed in his own world before the accident, so focused on his wealth and his land, that he hadn't taken the time to understand what true kindness was. But now, surrounded by a humble family who had so little, he saw a strength in Mary that amazed him. Her resilience, her ability to care for her children despite everything, was a quiet yet powerful force. Thomas found himself thinking about his own life. He had been raised in wealth with every comfort provided to him. Yet there had always been something missing, a true sense of connection, of family. Now, watching Mary with her children, seeing the love and care she poured into them, he realized how much he had been missing in his own life. For the first time, he wondered if he had been too focused on material things, too wrapped up in building his wealth and reputation. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, Thomas sat up in the bed Mary had made for him. His wounds were mostly healed now, though he still had to be careful with his movements. He watched as Mary worked outside, her children playing in the distance. She seemed to move with such purpose and grace, never stopping to rest, always making sure everything was in order. He admired her strength, but he also felt a deep sense of guilt for the fact that he had nothing to offer her in return. "Mary," Thomas called out to her gently, his voice still a little weak. She turned, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Yes, what is it?" "I just want to thank you. I don't know how to repay you for all you've done. You've saved my life and I don't have much to give you. But I want to do something for you." Mary walked over to where he sat, her expression kind but firm. "You don't need to repay me, Mr. Lawson. I did it because it was the right thing to do. You're welcome here, and I'm glad you're getting better." Thomas shook his head, his brow furrowing. "But I can't just leave it at that. There must be something I can do. I don't know what I'd have done without you." Mary smiled softly, her eyes warm but distant. "Just get better, Thomas. That's enough for me." Despite her insistence, Thomas couldn't let go of the feeling that he needed to do something. As the days turned into weeks and his strength returned, he began to think about what he could offer this woman who had shown him so much grace. He knew she was struggling, trying to keep the farm running despite the odds, but he also knew that there was more to her than just hard work. She had a heart full of love and a spirit that refused to be broken, even in the face of hardship. One evening, as the stars began to fill the sky, Thomas sat by the fire, contemplating his next move. Mary joined him a short time later, a cup of tea in her hands. She sat down beside him, and for a while the two of them just sat in silence, enjoying the quiet of the evening. Thomas found himself comfortable in her presence, something he hadn't expected after everything that had happened. He had come to appreciate the simple peace of this small farm, the calm of a life lived without the pressures of wealth and status. Finally, after a long pause, Thomas spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You've taught me something, Mary. I've been living my life all wrong. I've spent so much time chasing after things that don't matter, that I forgot what truly matters. You've shown me what it means to live with integrity, to care for others, and for that I'll be forever grateful." Mary didn't respond right away. She simply took a sip of her tea and looked at him, as if she was considering his words carefully. "I don't need anything from you," she finally said, "but I appreciate your kindness." I know you mean well, but I'm just trying to get by like everyone else. Thomas turned to her, his eyes filled with sincerity. I want to help you. I want to help you with the farm. I have the resources, the knowledge. Let me work with you. We can make this place thrive. You don't have to do it all alone. Mary looked at him, her expression soft but cautious. She had always been proud, determined to make her own way. But there was something in Thomas's offer that made her hesitate. She had been doing everything on her own for so long, but now for the first time she was being offered help. The idea of working together with someone, of sharing the load, was both a relief and a challenge for her. I don't know, she said quietly. I've been independent for so long. I don't want to feel like I owe anyone anything. Thomas nodded, understanding her hesitation. I'm not asking for anything in return, Mary. I just want to be part of your life, to help you, to make things easier for you. Let me help you with the farm. Let me show you that you don't have to do this alone. Mary looked at him for a long time, the weight of his words settling in her heart. She had spent so much of her life doing things on her own, fighting for survival, but she realized that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to keep fighting alone. With Thomas's offer, she could build something greater, something that could last. After a long moment of silence, she finally spoke. All right, but this doesn't change anything between us. We work together, nothing more. Thomas smiled, his heart swelling with relief and gratitude. I understand. We work together, nothing more, but thank you. From that moment on, Thomas became a part of Mary's life. He helped her improve the farm, brought new ideas, and shared his knowledge of ranching. Slowly but surely, their small farm began to thrive. And for the first time in a long while, Mary felt a sense of peace. She didn't have to do it all alone anymore. Over time, as the seasons changed, so did their relationship. They became friends, partners in more than just work, and slowly Mary began to trust Thomas more, letting him into her world and her heart. She didn't expect anything from him, but over the months she realized that he had become a part of her life in ways she had never imagined. Thomas, for his part, never pushed for anything more. He was content to be by her side, helping her, learning from her, and appreciating the family he had found in Mary and her children. He knew he had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at something deeper, a connection that would change everything for both of them. And so, their lives intertwined, each learning from the other, building a future together, one that neither could have foreseen, but one that would last forever.